Ooh, sun right in the eyes. Oh, that's blinding. Okay then. I'm gonna need sunglasses. Hey guys, welcome to a new episode of Josh's Car Corner. It's the first nice night we've had up here for a couple of weeks, so I thought tonight would be a good time to do a new efficiency blog episode. Gas has started to creep back up around here. It bottomed out at about $3.39 a gallon, and we're back up to $3.54, which means pretty soon for the premium we're going to be paying about $4 again. So I thought tonight would be a good time to do another episode on how to get the most mileage you can out of a GTO or any muscle car for that matter. Now, I've learned a lot of things this summer about the car, and the thing I've learned most of all is how to get the most out of a mile per gallon out of this car. I've gotten to the point now where in cruising situations, I'm getting about 27, 28, maybe 29 miles per gallon depending on where I'm driving, what the weather's like, how I'm driving, everything. There's a lot of things that factor into getting good fuel economy, and the biggest thing, and what you control the most, is how you're driving the car. There are all kinds of things that I'm going to mention about how to save gas, but definitely changing your driving style is the most important thing. Now, I think we can all agree that the 1/4 skip shift is a pretty stupid thing. It's just too much of a gap to cover when you're trying to accelerate. However, skipping gears is not a bad idea, and it's something I actually encourage. I've started doing it myself. For example, if I'm at a dead stop and I take off, what I've been doing lately is going from first to third, and then into fifth gear, and then eventually into sixth gear. If I'm coasting to a stop or going really slowly, I can go sometimes 2 to 4 to 6, but typically I'm going 1, 3, 5, 6. And the reason for that is so you get a nice easy launch, and the gaps are a lot closer together. Now, the gaps between 1 and 3 and 2 and 4 are pretty much a 2 to 1 ratio. So what that means is if you wind it up to about 3 grand in first gear and you shift into third, you're going to come into third gear at about 1500 RPM. And the same holds true for second to fourth. It's about a 2 to 1 ratio. However, the gap from 3 to 5 is less than a 2 to 1 ratio because fifth is such a short gear. It's just a short overdrive gear, and it's really close to fourth. So going from third to fifth is actually a pretty smooth transition, and it gives you a really smooth way to get in and accelerate and then knock it into sixth gear. Now I'm getting up to about, I don't know, 20 miles an hour in first, about 30 in fifth, about anywhere from 40 to 45 in fifth, and then going into sixth gear, and just keeping those revs as low as possible. Now in first gear I wind it up a bit because obviously the gap between first and third is big. I'm going to about 2500 RPMs there, and then I'm going about 2 grand in third, going about 1800, 2 grand in fifth, and then going into sixth. Idea is just to keep it below 2000 RPM. You've got so much power and so much torque, you don't need to wind it up to accelerate up to a good speed. Change how you shift, because that will make the biggest difference. Now obviously in an automatic car you can't do that. You're basically a slave to whatever the transmission decides it's going to do. However, if you roll into it and just accelerate gingerly, you know it'll shift nice and early, and you'll probably get into 4 in overdrive about 45, maybe 40 if you do it right, and you can get better fuel economy that way. But an automatic's always going to suffer the most on fuel economy because it's heavier, there's more parasitic losses, and it just doesn't like to shift, and you've got less gears to play with, and it just wants to sit there and hold revs all day. It's not the same as a manual, so it's always going to do worse, and I think that's why the GTO got a gas guzzler tax on it when it came with an automatic. Now, doing that is important. Also, what you do with the throttle is very important again. Obviously, you don't want to rev it up, but just making slow, deliberate ginger movements with the throttle is where it pays off. And keeping an eye at all times on your instant fuel economy and what that number is doing. Because I am able to accelerate and pick up speed from 55 to 65 and still get over 20 miles to the gallon while I'm accelerating. It's just, if you're willing to take your time and do it gingerly and do it just very slowly and very slowly manipulate that throttle, you can get great fuel economy and still pick up speed. And then maintaining speed is the same thing. Now you can drive on your own with just your foot, try to maximize fuel economy, and a lot of people do that. I mean, there's hypermilers out there, and it's a technique on how to maximize fuel economy, but personally, what I do is once I'm up to the speed I want to go, I just set the cruise, I lock it, and I go. Because the cruise really does a good job of maintaining speed and not burning excess fuel. It'll hold speed, and obviously when you climb a hill, you could take the cruise off and just decelerate a little bit up the hill for a little extra fuel economy. I don't bother going that far with it, but you could do that. And also, if you do use the cruise, engaging it properly. If you slow down, if you're forced to slow down for some reason, and say you lock the cruise at 60 and you want to get back up, the best thing to do is speed back up on your own to just a little bit above 60 and then re-engage the cruise. Because if you are at or below 60, what's going to happen is immediately the car's going to want to get up to 60 and it's going to surge and get itself up to 60 as quickly as possible because it wants to hold that speed. So that's going to burn extra fuel. So keep that in mind too. Now, getting back to shifting very briefly, there's something I've noticed that a lot of guys will do when they're driving a stick shift car, is what they'll do when they're coming up to a stop sign or they need to slow down, they'll just push the clutch in and knock it into neutral and just coast down. And you can do that. However, you're costing yourself fuel when you don't need to be. All cars, ever since the advent of OBD2 pretty much, have got something built into them called Deceleration Fuel Cutoff. Basically, it's built into the computer that when you take your foot off the gas and you keep the car in gear, the computer knows the car is in gear and will cut off all fuel delivery to the engine. And you can notice it when you look at your instant fuel economy. You'll notice it either go to 99.9 or 0.0. You've got no fuel going into the engine at that point. So the best way to decelerate when you have a manual transmission car is to just lift your foot off the gas and coast down. And now in the GTO, I have it modified a little bit, and I'll talk about this later. So the DFCO is very aggressive and stays on for a very long time. There's also something built into the computer called CFCO, and it stands for Clutch Fuel Cutoff. It's the same theory, except when you put your foot on the clutch, it cuts fuel until you get down to a predetermined RPM, and then it brings the fuel back in. So when you're shifting between gears, the engine drops its revs really quickly and you're not using any fuel in the process. You'll notice that when you shift at like 2 or 3 grand and you push your foot on the clutch for the next gear, it'll kick it back in when you get down to about 1500 RPM or so, and then just gradually get down to idle. It's just another fuel saving measure, and it's in there too. I haven't really modified it. I just let it do what it does, and it saves a little bit of gas there. Now, the next thing I'm going to focus on is wheels and tires. As you'll see, the car no longer has the factory 18s on it. I actually don't own them anymore. There was a guy in Illinois doing a big brake kit and he needed 18, so I traded him my 18s, and in exchange I got these 17-inch Hankook all-season high-performance tires, and I mounted them on the 17s that I was using for the race tires when I went to Road America, and here's why. For years and years, I've run on the assumption when I have a sporty car that I should just put summer tires on it for the summer and it'll grip really good and it'll handle well and everything. Well, the reality is that 95% of the time when I'm driving a car, I'm just driving the car. I'm not doing anything sporty. I'm not cornering hard. I'm not accelerating hard. So a summer tire for a car you just drive most of the just as a car is not really necessary. They wear a lot faster. They're heavier. They're more expensive. And they have a lot more rolling resistance than an all-season tire. So I've decided that from now on, when I just want tires for driving down the road, I'm not going to buy summer tires anymore. I'm just going to buy all-seasons for a lot of reasons. They're a lot lighter, they're cheaper, they have less rolling resistance, which is the thing when you're aiming for fuel economy. And also these wheels. Now the factory 18-inch wheels, and the big problem with them is that they weigh 28 pounds a piece. They're really heavy. The factory 17s, I don't really know, but I would imagine they're somewhere between 25, 26 pounds, somewhere around there. These are aftermarket Vox wheels. They're 17 by 8, but they only weigh 20.5 pounds a piece. And coupled with these all-season tires, I'm probably saving about 10 pounds per corner. That adds up to 40 pounds off the weight of the car, which helps. But the big thing is I've decreased my rolling resistance. And a lot of people will argue that rolling resistance, for every pound of rotating mass you can take off a car, it's the equivalent of, like, some say 3, some say 4 pounds of weight off the weight of the car. So running on that logic, if I've saved 40 pounds in rotating mass, I've saved anywhere from 120 to 160 pounds of virtual weight off the car. And it does pay off in the fuel economy. I've seen already I've gained at least a mile per gallon just by switching to these wheels and tires, because I have so much less weight I have to get up to speed and keep up to speed rotating. So that's very beneficial. Speaking of weight, Weight of the car, again, is also very important. I've talked about this before. Talked about it with the battery, and I talked about it last year at the drag strip, what I've done to remove weight. So the car right now, with a quarter tank of gas as it sits, weighs 3,560 pounds. That is about 200 pounds lighter than the factory weight of the car. And it's been done by, yeah, the tow bar delete, the fuel tank brace thing, the lightweight skid plate, and the wheels and tires have all added up to 200 pounds. But I'm not done yet, because my ultimate goal for the car is to get it down to 3,500 pounds without sacrificing any of the luxuries. So the next thing I'm going to do is the rear seat delete. It's about $200 for the kit, and you wouldn't think you'd be saving that much weight just taking the back seats out, but the thing is, the back seat, the backrest, and the pad that you sit on, the bottom, weighs 40 pounds. So that's 40 pounds of weight I'm going to take off the car. That's going to help just that much more. Modifications to make to the car can also increase fuel economy if you're doing the right ones. The biggest thing you have to remember with engine efficiency is all internal combustion engines are basically a giant vacuum pump. They suck air in, they blow air out. So anywhere you can make the job of the engine doing that a lot easier is going to pay off in fuel economy. So cold air intakes, opening up the exhaust with headers and catback exhausts and anything there, porting your intake, things like that, up until the point that you start modifying engine internals, like modifying and going with huge flow cylinder heads and boring it out and stroking your engine. That stuff's going to kill your fuel economy, because now you're not because if you're doing that, now you're just going to drive it like a mental and you're never going to get fuel economy anyway. But even doing that, it will decrease fuel economy because it makes it harder for it to do its job efficiently when you're just driving around. Other things you can consider are parasitic losses. Again, rotating mass. Any weight you can lose in the drive line is going to pay off in the fuel economy realm. Lighter weight drive shaft, and that's something I'm going to do as well, because the factory drive shaft is heavy, and because that two-piece setup with the stupid rubber donuts, it's a point of failure, and I do want to replace it because my rubber donuts are starting to tear a little bit, and I don't want it to snap on me. Lighter weight clutches. I mean, if you're not interested in 500, 600, 700 horsepower and you just want to drive, there are lighter weight flywheels out there you can get in lighter weight clutch kits to save a little rotating mass there. You lose a bit of punch off the line because the rotating mass of the flywheel is what helps you surge off the line, but it's going to pay off in the fuel economy realm. Also things like underdrive pulleys, anything, place where you can remove parasitic loss from accessory drive is going to help out. So those are the kind of bolt-ons I would look into if I was looking to increase horsepower and keep my fuel economy. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is engine computer modification, i.e. tuning the engine with like HP tuners or Diablo tuners or anything like that. You can make some gains in there, and especially if you've done bolt-ons and modifications to your engine, you need to go in there and retune the car, because everything is calibrated to work with a factory engine. And as soon as you make the engine's ability to get more air in and out that much easier, and it can flow more air, it throws off the mass airflow sensor tables, and it needs to be recalibrated and modified to get your fuel economy back and to get your air-fuel ratio back properly. The computer can make adjustments. It has fuel trim things to make adjustments to fuel economy, but it can only go so far. So you really need to get that dialed back in, and I've spent the last few weeks doing that myself, and I've got my cruising air-fuel ratios just about as close to perfect as you're going to get, and I've been working on the wide open right now. I just got my intake ported this past week, and I had to go in and just make sure with my wide open was still right on, and it actually gained a little more airflow on the top end, so I had to go back in there and make some adjustments. But you need to do that when you're making modifications. HP tuners is what I use, and I think it's pretty much the best. The Diablo tuners, I can't speak to experience on those because I've never used them, but I know they can do most of the basics, but they can't get into the really advanced stuff, and if you are an advanced tuner and you know what all the things in the computer can do, I think HP tuners is the better way to go. You can modify, like I said, the deceleration fuel cutoff, and I've made it extremely aggressive to kick in as early as possible and to stay on as long as possible too. So I'm getting that maximum coast down, no fuel situation. So I'm going to be getting a lot of fuel economy there. That's probably where I save my most, is just I coast down and I make my stopping distances take as long as possible, and I use the gears and I coast down and I try to use the brakes as little as possible. Anytime you use the brakes, you're just wasting fuel because you're taking all that energy you've built up and you're just turning it into heat and throwing it away. So the worst thing you can do when you're trying to get fuel economy is brake. So just training your mind to see what's coming and know what's going to happen and prepare for it properly without using the brakes, that's where you're going to get your best fuel economy, is just concentrating on what you're doing. And if you're using the cruise, that works, but just when you kick it off, just tap your brakes and coast down for whatever reason you need to coast down and pick your speed back up gradually. It's a whole process, and it takes a little while to teach yourself. You just got to focus on it. Every time you go out there and drive, just say, today I'm going to focus on my acceleration. Today I'm going to focus on my shifting, and just, it's a process. And when it all comes together, suddenly you'll just be amazed at how much fuel economy or how much miles per gallon you can get out of a 400 plus horsepower muscle car. It really isn't that hard. It just takes a little training your brain, because you want to sit there and you say, no, I've got all this power, I want to use it, I want to have some fun. Well, you can have fun, but you can also get good gas mileage out of it too. So that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you can take some good things out of it. The next video I'm going to be doing is a fuel economy run of my own. And I haven't quite decided where or what I'm going to do yet, but I'm going to challenge myself to just see how far I can go, how good at a mile per gallon I can get out of one of these. Now, I just did a drive down to Madison when I was getting my intake poured, and from where I was driving was about 80 miles. I achieved my best fuel economy ever. I averaged 28.3 miles to the gallon. I think I can do even better than that. And if I can, I have a challenge in my head that I'm thinking about doing that might sound crazy to a lot of people, but I think it's possible, and I think it's worth going after. And even if I don't, and even if I couldn't complete it, I think it would be a lot of fun anyway. So stay tuned, and see you guys later.